Hello and welcome to a quick tutorial where we are going to learn how to make a simple spaceship on the Diaspora space build server. I last made these tutorials like 3 years ago, almost on the dot. And it's time for an update because they're kind of useless now. A lot has changed since I last made these tutorials. Before we get started, I'd like to just show off the thing that we're going to make. I haven't actually recorded this beforehand, so we're going to try and replicate it. I made something beforehand only because I wanted to make sure that I actually got everything. So we got a door, some very basic life support back here, plenty of storage, like half of the hull is actually just storage. We've got a ship core, we've got our gyropod, a chair, some buttons to turn life support on, as well as any random wire stuff we'll need throughout this. In the last tutorial, I didn't cover weapons at all. In this one, we're going to cover some very basic things about weapons. And that's about it, so we'll get started. Moving on to the next section, we are going to put together our ship. Now, there are several ways that you can find props to build your ship. The easiest way is probably going to be downloading the SPEP spawn list fix from our forums. If you don't have it, then when you click over in all of these, you will not see any models. The folders will all be empty. However, if you have downloaded those, then you will see many models and you will not have to go searching very far to find more than likely any prop you will ever use. If you do not have those spawn lists, you have two alternatives for finding props. You can use the SPEP part spawner tool, which only has the ability to spawn some of the small bridge and mod bridge pieces. So for example, in here you'll find hallways of various sizes, some elevator parts, wings, a work in progress type of hull that was never actually finished, and many other things. To use this tool, all you need to do is find the prop that you want to spawn, select it, and left-click with the tool. One important thing to note about what it gets spawned, however, is that it will both be unfrozen and it will not have an owner. Because it doesn't have an owner, that means that anyone can actually just pick up the prop and it will then be owned by them. So immediately after spawning something using that tool, the first thing you should do is pick it up with your phys gun. If you don't, then anyone will be able to take that part and it will be theirs, not yours, even if you can undo it and not them. Moving on to the other way of spawning props, however. If neither of those are working for you, you can also go into the Browse menu, go to Games, and All. This will list every single model folder in your Gary's Mod installation, and as you can see, there can be quite a few. If you want to be able to find any model, however, this is your best bet. Now, in particular, there are a few folders for the space build props, such as the space build folder, which has some medbridge props, which also has the Nova subfolder, which has more SLIFO props. There's the SLIFO 2 folder with a bunch of small kind of decorative props. There is the SLIFO folder, which contains all of your SLIFO parts, of which there are way too many. There's SLIFO walls, has a bunch of walls for building bases. There's a small bridge, which has a ton of subfolders, different kinds of parts. And if we scroll up, we have SPEP community, which has some other additions to the models, most of which seem to go with the SLIFO parts. If we scroll up even more, there it is, the Ceres folder. This is where you will find all of your mod bridge. As you can see, there are a number of subfolders in here having different kinds of parts. For example, miscellaneous things like doors, elevators, some generator models, and you also have your plates and your core building pieces. Those are the primary ways you can find props. For the purposes of this tutorial, we will just be using the SPEP models spawn list, because that is the one that is going to make it the easiest to find what we are looking for. Now, we need 2 props and a door. So to start off with, we will find those props. Now I know that the prop that we want to use is the SB Cockpit 2. Right. So we will pick this up and align it to world. To align it to world, just if you don't know, you can hold E to rotate, and if you hold Shift while pressing E, it will snap to a 45-degree angle by default. It is possible to configure that, however I do not have the console command to do so on hand. You might look it up on YouTube or the FaceBunch forums. Now, the other prop that we are going to need is an engine. Now, one interesting thing is that the spawn list can actually not have certain props. In the event that it doesn't have what you are looking for, you will need to look somewhere else. I do know that the part spawner tool does have the part that we need. We are looking for a Mandrake small bridge engine, which is this one in particular. I think it looks rather nice. So we're going to pick that up to make sure we own it, and snap it to world. Now we need one more thing for our basic hull, and that is a door. To do that, we're going to go to the SPEP door tool, and we are going to find a fitting door. In this case, I want it to open up from the side. So we're going to just select that door. Make sure the 2 boxes at the top are checked so that you have wire inputs and the ability to press use on the door to open and close it, as you can see here. Now, again, we have the issue that this is not owned by you. And this is a little bit more complicated when compared to the part spawner tool, because doors are made up of multiple entities. So as you can see, I've owned the primary hull piece for the door. However, if you look at the actual door, you will see that it is not owned. So make sure you go around and use your fizz gun to own any of those door pieces. Now that we have all of our parts, we need to assemble them. We again have many ways to do that. You could put them all together with your fizz gun. If you really wanted to, you could use the precision alignment tool, a very, very popular choice as of late. There's also the precision tool, not to be confused with the precision alignment tool. The precision tool allows you to do a number of different constraints. It is also much simpler to use. And then finally, you have the SPEP part assembler. Now, by default, the part assembler does not weld or no collide parts, and although it is kind of difficult to see, these 2 checkboxes will let you do that. I recommend only having it weld the parts, if anything. We will touch on why later in this tutorial. Now, for the purposes of this tutorial, though, I'm going to show you how to use all three of those tools that I just mentioned, because they are all very useful, and, well, you should know how to use them because there's different situations where they are all more useful than the other. So, for example, we're just going to use precision alignment first, and we're going to use the most simple way of putting things together. Now, when you click with the precision alignment tool, it will put a point down. If it is not putting a point down, which you can see here as indicated by this red cross with a 1 in the corner, then what you need to do is go into the menu for the tool and click point, hit pause, and as well you will want to make sure that these 3 checkboxes are in fact checked. They're important to make sure that everything gets aligned properly. Now, this menu looks very complicated, however, it is really simple to use. All we need to do is left click to snap our point right to the top center of this prop, and then if we hold shift and left click on the door in the top center, another point will appear there. Now, I want to move this cockpit to this door so they are attached. To do that, we need to right click the cockpit, make sure that we select the point that we want to move from, and then select the point that we need to move to. So in this case, we will select point 1 on the left side and point 2 on the right side. In order to move the entities, all we then need to do is press the Move Entity button. Now, the prop is aligned. It's aligned pretty much perfectly. There's nothing in the game that can actually get it 100% perfectly. However, as you can see, it is now aligned. Now, it is not welded. That is something important to note. So if you were to try to duplicate this, you would only duplicate the part that you clicked on. We will get into how to weld things in a bit, just because we do have a multi-weld tool specifically for welding multiple parts of a ship. Now, that is the basics of how you use precision alignment. However, there's some more to it. Just going to point out, the menu you see in the tool menu is not all there is to this tool. While you have the tool out, if you press reload, it will open a menu with a terrifying number of tabs and different buttons that do a ton of different things. If you're looking to build a ship and you want parts to be aligned in a specific way, learning this tool is invaluable. Now, there are 2 more tools that we're going to use. Next up, we're going to use the Precision tool. Now, I want to point out that I have mine set to an experimental mode, so I will probably have more options than you do by default. If you want to enable more options, go into the General Tool options at the bottom and select the experimental user level in order to see every single option this tool has to offer. Now, in this case, we want to make sure under Apply, only Freeze Target is checked. Nothing else should be checked, as some of these options can cause some problems while building. Next, we want to move to the third tool mode, which is the Move tool mode. We do not need to rotate this, as we've already aligned it. We do not need any snap distance, and we don't need to do anything involving no collides or auto alignment. In order to use this tool, having Smart Snap enabled is recommended. In order to make sure words have failed me. Smart Snap is enabled. Look at a prop with the tool gun out. If you're not seeing this white grid, then it is not enabled on your client. In order to enable it, go to the Options tab at the top of your tool menu and go down to Smart Snap. In here you'll see a number of options related to Smart Snap, but the only one that we really care about is probably going to be the Enable checkbox. Now that you have that enabled, all you need to do is look at the top center of this prop and hold E to snap, and then left click to start the movement with the precision tool, and then repeat the process for where you want to move it to. As you can see, our parts are now attached. We're going to undo that, however, as we have one more tool that we want to be able to use, and that is the SBP part assembler. The part assembler used to work by spawning in all these widgets on the props automatically, and for older players who used to play when that was what it did, it's really confusing to use now because it doesn't do that. In order to make the widget show up, you need to right-click on the props that you want to move between. As you can see, as I've right-clicked, some blue hole markers have appeared. Select the prop that you wish to move, and then select the point where you wish to move it to. And then it will move them together, and because of the weld checkbox that we have in here, it will also weld them. Now, our cockpit on the front is not welded because we used precision alignment. In order to weld that, we're going to use the multi-weld tool. Now it is worth noting that our multi-weld tool is a little bit different from the usual multi-weld tool that you find on other Garry's Mod servers. It only makes a single constraint from each selected entity to the one you right-click on. Many other multi-weld implementations put a weld between every single prop, which normally would be okay. However, because we value the constraint limit here, we don't want to do that, so we've made our own multi-weld tool. Now, in order to weld everything together, we're just going to select the two parts on the ends of the ship and right-click the prop we want to weld them to, which in this case is just the door in the center. And they're welded. Now, that's about it for actually building your ship. You now have a basic hull. Next up, we're going to learn about saving, though, because saving is a really important thing to do. If you don't save, even though the server is actually really stable these days, it does occasionally crash still, and, well, you don't want to lose your work, do you? I guess you could be some crazy person who likes losing their stuff, but most of the time you'll want to save it. On the Diaspora server, we have two different duplicators, and the default Garry's Mod duplicator has been removed. In order to save things, you will have to choose between the two. There's a number of differences between them, and people tend to just choose based on personal preference. I personally use Advanced Dupe 2 more often than the normal Advanced Dupe, however, they both have their use cases. We're going to start by saving with Advanced Dupe 1. Select the tool. Now right-click on the central prop that you've welded everything to. You will see that it will ghost, and all you need to do now is go into the Advanced Duplicator menu, hit Save to Server, type in a name, such as Tutorial Ship 2016, optionally enter a description, and press Save. You will see a loading bar, and it will save. Now, if you go into your menu and scroll around, you will see Tutorial Ship 2016. In order to load the duplication, all you need to do is select it and press Open. You will then see the ship appear, and then if you left-click, it will spawn in. The process is very similar for Advanced Duplicator 2. However, there are some slight differences. Now, the first step is the same. Right-click to copy the duplication that you want. Now, instead of clicking a Save to Server button, what you need to do is just go down to these boxes here and type in a name. So we'll just type tutorial 2016 and we'll just put a 2 on the end, and we will save it in the tutorial 2016 folder that I made. I will actually show you how to make a folder though, because that would probably be a good thing to know how to do. If you simply right-click the Advanced Dupe 2 folder up here at the top with a name in that box, and go to New Folder, it will create a new folder. Now it may be created all the way down at the very bottom of the tool menu, so you might have to do a little bit of scrolling to get to it. Now to save the file, we're just going to come up with a quick name, and then right-click the folder and press Save. Now you will notice that there are two buttons to the right of the text box. Those buttons will sometimes not work, so it is not recommended to use them. As well, this refresh button in the top right corner can sometimes break the tool, so you should also avoid pressing that. Now, loading is pretty much exactly the same, except all you need to do is double-click on the dupe you wish to load, and it will load it. And then you left-click, and it will paste, and off you go. The next section is life support. And yeah, life support should be fun. Lots of new life support. We're going to stop the video really quickly, however, and we will resume in just a second. Okay, so for this section, I have gone ahead and spawned everything that we're going to need beforehand. I'm doing this because some of you probably don't need me to go through step by step attaching all of this to the ship, and probably just want to know what you need to make life support work at a very basic level. If you've played Space Build before, some of this will look familiar to you. However, it should be noted that a lot of it is very different from previous versions of Space Build. For example, there are no resource nodes. There is a ship core from Space Combat 2, which acts as one. However, there are not actually any nodes. As well, storage is split by the type of storage that you're using, as opposed to, in previous versions, having just a giant storage cache and a bunch of separate things that held a single kind of resource. As you can see here, we've got a gas storage which holds a bunch of different gases, and a liquid storage which just holds a couple of different liquids. Now, some other things to note. Water is limited. This is a new thing. Previous versions of Space Build did not have that. As well, there are a number of new generators which previous versions of Space Build did not have. Life support in this version is a fair bit more complicated. However, at its simplest level, it is actually simpler than it used to be. You do not have to have an external water pump to fill up your ship with water. You can use a moisture evaporator, which will just pull water out of the air. You can also not kill a planet by using an air compressor to obtain resources, which is a much needed simplification because, well, cadets used to kinda sorta kill everyone on accident. It was kind of a problem. You can't do that anymore, thankfully. Okay, so anyways, moving on to a basic overview of what we have here. Now, as mentioned before, we have our two storages and our ship core. A ship core is basically a requirement in order to build a functioning spaceship. We are going to go over how you make a ship core in just a bit. Now, we're just going to show what all we have. We also here have two solar panels. As you can see, they're only multiplied by 0.11, and that is because of the direction they are pointing. In this version of Space Build, the pointing solar panels at the sun thing actually works correctly. As you can see, if we look over there, there is a sun. And if we pick up this solar panel and align it towards the sun, the multiplier will go up as we get closer to the sun's angle, and it will provide a lot more power. Now, we will get into the reason why we have two of these when we start attaching them to the ship. And there is a good reason for that. And then finally, we have three generators here. We have the moisture evaporator, which, as I explained before, will pull water from the atmosphere. This is useful because you don't need to have a water pump. We also have a water splitter. The water splitter takes water and energy and outputs oxygen and hydrogen. This will let you set up a basic life support system. And then we also have a hydrogen fuel cell, which takes oxygen and hydrogen to produce energy and water. You will notice that between these three generators, there's actually something of a loop where water gets recycled from the hydrogen fuel cell and then used to make more power. It keeps going and going. It makes your storage last much longer even if you have a relatively small amount. Now, something worth noting is that in the current version, the default models for storage are kind of pathetic and, well, to be perfectly honest, they're kind of useless. So we will be changing the models of these storages as that is a new feature. Now, there's one thing here that I forgot to spawn, which is the life support core. Now what the life support core does is it fills your ship with air and gives you gravity. In older versions of Space Build, you needed to go in and use gravity plating, or a climate regulator, or any number of other things in order to have air in your ship. That is no longer the case. You only need to have this single entity. Now, it does not have an overlay currently. That will be remedied in a future version. So, at first glance, it may look like it doesn't work. However, I assure you it does work. Now, moving on to attaching all of this to the ship. We don't need to do too much on that front, we just need to kind of slap it on there. However, because I didn't show spawning these, I'm going to do that now. So, to start with, we're just going to remove all of this, because we don't need it. Now, the first thing that we are going to need is a ship core. In this case, I'm just going to use the helicopter bomb model. To make a ship core, go to the Space Combat 2 tab of your tool menu. Find the Ship Cores tool. Now, there are some important notes about how to use it in here, however, they're not going to be very useful for the tutorial, so I'm not going to read them. At the bottom, you can set things such as the color of your shields, which will affect the color of hits to your shields, and you can allocate points to increase stats in various areas. For the case of this tutorial, we are just going to raise the shield up a little bit so we get a little bit extra health. But on your own ship, you should play with these sliders in order to come up with a nice fitting for your own ship that follows your own preferences and style. Now, to make this helicopter bomb into a ship core, all we need to do is left click it with our tool gun, and then you will see that it has become a ship core. The ship core has all manner of stats. As you can see, we have the amount of hull health we've got, the amount of armor health we have, as well as the shield health. Below those health values, you can see the current and peak shield recharge values, which is basically how fast your shield will go up at certain points. Below that, we've got a nice little graph that shows, well, the health values. It just looks nice. There's no real purpose to it. Looks interesting. Then below that, we have the capacitor, which is how much energy storage and how much energy you have stored in it. Below that, we also have another bar, which shows the capacitor percentage as a nice orange bar. Below that, we have the sig radius. Now, sigrad, that stands for signature radius, and that is basically the size of your ship. Then we have the class of your ship and the node radius. The class of your ship is assigned automatically based on the size of your ship, and the node radius is the equivalent of an older Life Support 3 resource node, in that is the maximum range that you can link life support devices to the core. The node radius will automatically change so that it is the size of your ship. You will never want or need multiple ship cores on your ship. If we walk up to the core and press use on it, it will bring up a menu which will show more information. You can see your resistances on the lower left plane. You can see your health values, their maximum amount and their current percentage in the upper left. On the right side, you can see more statistics, including a shield recharge time in seconds and the effective hit points of your ship, which adds up all of your health and takes into account your resistances to give you some rough idea of how much health your ship actually has. Next up, we have the fitting tab, which basically just shows how many modules your ship can fit, how many you've used, and a percentage for all of them, as well as the CPU and power grid. These are all very important for building ships, however we will not be going over core modules in this tutorial, because it's a bit beyond the scope of what I want to cover. Next up, we've got the hold tab. The hold tab shows you all of the storage on your ship. It will show you what kind of storage the resource is in the first column, the name of the resource in the second column, the amount of the resource you have in the third, the maximum amount of that resource that you can hold in the fourth, and the percentage of how much you have in the fifth. Up next, the linked entities tab. Now, this will be empty if you just have a ship core. However, what this tab shows is every device that has been linked to your ship core on the entire ship and how far away it is. This can be useful if you want to make sure that something has been linked, because sometimes it'll show that it's not linked or something, however it'll show up in here if it is actually linked. Finally, at the bottom, you have a small settings pane which lets you self-destruct your ship, enable or disable the shield, show the hit effects on the shield, change the name of your ship, and that's about it. Then there's the global storage button, which in this version does not do anything. However, in a later version that will open another menu which lets you put storage into your global storage. Now, we are going to name the ship core Tutorial Ship 3. Just press enter to submit, and now that is saved. We're going to close out of this menu, and we're just going to position this inside of our ship. So we just gotta take this and throw it right on in here. The position of the ship core does not matter, however, for the optimal linking radius for devices, it's recommended that you put it near the center. I'm not going to pay too much attention to how centered that is. However, I am going to line it up just a little bit, and we will leave that there. Now, we need to weld the ship core to the ship so that it will actually take into account all of the props in its health calculations. To do that, we're just going to get out our multi-weld tool again, select the ship core, and weld it to our door prop. Give it a second and it will update to show the health values of your ship and any other stats that you may want to know about. Now, we need to spawn our life support entities next. We're going to start off with storage. Now, because we need a really quite large amount of storage to allow you to fly around for a decent amount of time, we are going to go and find some different models. So first things first, we're going to go to the storage tab of the Space Combat 2 Entity Spawner, which you can find under Ship Tools, Life Support Spawner. And we need only two kinds of storage. We need gas storage, and we need liquid storage. Again, we are not going to be using these models, however, these are the two kinds of storage we're going to need. I'm going to remove those, and we're going to start off with the gas storage. Now, to find the model that we need, we're going to go into our SPAP spawn lists and go to Small Bridge Parts. In this list, somewhere, there is a piece that we can attach to the side of our ship. Just a matter of finding it. Can be difficult when there are so many things in here. Ah yes, here it is. Spawned it inside of me on accident. As you can see, there's this one, which is really kind of big. And we're not going to use this because it's too big. Instead, we need the single one. Now, we're going to get our gas storage. We're going to right-click on the model we want to use. As you can see, the ghost has updated to show that it is that model that will be spawned. If we left-click, you'll notice it will spawn and that the amount of resources you can store in it is much higher. Now, we want to have two of these. We can remove this prop because we're done with it. Now, for the liquid storage, just to save some space, we're actually going to take this engine prop on the back and turn that into our liquid storage. Water is the primary fuel for this ship. As long as we've got water, we can continue to run all of our life support. So we want a really big storage for that. This model provides a lot of storage. Now, we're going to remove this engine on the back, and we're going to use one of our tools to attach it. In this case, I'm just going to use the part assembler because it was the first one that I saw. Now that that has been attached, we need to attach these two. I'm going to attach these using my fizz gun, or at least I'm going to attach the first one using my fizz gun. Just because I want this aligned up in a certain way. Okay, that should do it. Now, in order to attach the other one, what we're going to do is we're going to take this and make sure they have the same angles. Then I'm going to get out the precision tool, and I'm going to use the move option once again. In this case, I'm going to put it right here. Click. We're going to go to the same spot on the other one, snap, and click. As you can see, they're now attached. And all we need to do is get out multi-weld and attach them to the ship. Okay, now this should have been updated, and if we go to the Hold tab, you will now see all of these resources have been added to the Hold tab. As well, if you go to the Linked Entities tab, you can see all of the storage caches have shown up. We'll close that once again, and now we just need to get our generators. Now, to get our generators, we're going to go to the Generators tab of the Entity Spawner, and we are going to find them. Now the first one is the 2 solar panels. Next, we need the hydrogen fuel cell. We need the water splitter. And finally, we need the moisture vaporator. As well, just to save us looking for it later, we're going to spawn the life support core. Now that we have our generators spawned, we're going to start attaching them to the ship, starting with the solar panels. So, first things first, we're going to spawn the solar panels, as we've already done. Then we're going to get out our precision tool again. We're going to snap right in the center on the back of this, and then we're just going to find a nice position to put this. So for example, right there ought to do. Now, the reason that we're putting this here, going back to what I said earlier about the reason that we have two of these. On many maps, the sun will not be coming from straight up, so putting this on the top will be a bad idea. If it's on the side at this kind of an angle, then you'll be getting a very good amount of sun. So for example, on this map, if we were to rotate the ship 90 degrees, this would actually be getting us kind of a lot of power. Far more power than we actually need. Now, we're going to take this one here, and we're going to put it right on top of the ship. I want to kind of line these up so it looks nice. That'll do. Not the prettiest looking thing ever, but it will work. Now, moisture vaporator has kind of a weird hitbox. You'll notice that the center is kind of off. Now, I want this to be facing a specific direction, like this. I'm going to take it, and we're just going to attach it to this storage here. Just going to put it, say, right there. Up next, we've just got to put these three things inside of the ship. So, we're just going to rotate these. We will start with the life support core, snap right to the center, go into the ship. Try not to have that open in our face while we position this. Want that right in the center back. Then we're going to take our water splitter, get it by its center, put that right there. And finally, our hydrogen fuel cell, which we will put right here. Now we just need to weld these. And all of our life support is attached. We will be doing some basic wiring in order to set these up so that they work. However, right now is actually a good time to save your work. So we're just going to grab one of our duplicator tools, in this case, Advanced Duplicator 2, right click, type a name, in this case Tutorial 2, right click, and save. Now our work is saved, so even if the server were to crash in 5 seconds, we would be fine. Now, we want to do a couple of things with this to make it easy to use. By default, the numbers that all of these generators are spitting out won't work with each other, even if it is pretty close. So what we need is a constant value from WireMod. So if you go up to the top of your tool menu and go to the Wire tab, if you scroll down under, in this case, input and output, there it is, there's a constant value. Now, I have already inputted the values that I need. However, what you need to do is set the amount of numbers to 2. And then what you need to do is type these two numbers into the two boxes that appear. So 0.2 will come in later, however 1.5 is the number that we need to multiply our generators by. So all we need to do after we've inputted those values is just simply place it. So we'll just put that right there. Next, we need 3 buttons. And for simplicity, I'm just going to use 1, 2, 3. You can also find the buttons that are right above the constant value. Should be fairly easy to find. Now, the reason we want 3 buttons is so that we can just press 1 to turn on the first generator, 2 to turn on the second, and 3 to turn on the final set of generators. This will make it really simple. So to start with, we're going to wire the moisture evaporator to 1. And now I realize that I didn't show you where to get the wire tool. I haven't done tutorials in a long time. It's obvious. Alright, so basically, in your wire tab, again, you go down to Tools. You open up that menu, and you get out the wire tool. Then, all you need to do is go to the generator and wire on to the button. The next generator we need to wire is the water splitter. Oh hey look! It's one of those server crashes I was talking about. Well, I guess we're going to have to resume this after the server is back from the land of the dead. So I will be right back. So as it turns out, that wasn't a server crash, that was actually the data center dropping the network. Okay, so resuming where we left off, we need to wire our water splitter. So take on and wire it to the second button. Now, we need to wire the hydrogen fuel cell and the life support core as well. Now, in order to wire multiple things using the wire tool, hold Shift and select the second input that you would like to wire. Next, just simply go over to your thing, in this case the button, and wire it up. Now that we have those all wired, we need to set the multipliers. In order to do this, we just scroll to multiplier on the wire inputs. We're going to hold Shift, and we're going to select the multiplier on each generator. Now, all we need to do is wire the multipliers to that constant value we made earlier. In this case, we want to wire them to the 1.5 output. Now, if you look at any of the generators, you will notice that the values have changed and that the multiplier reads 1.5 at the top. Now, if we wanted to, we could actually turn the life support on and it would all function. Just to make sure everything is working as intended, let's do just that. First we press the first button. That will turn on the moisture evaporator. As you can see, it's collecting water. Next, if we turn on button 2, the water splitter will activate and start producing oxygen and hydrogen. And then finally, if we press 3, the life support core and the hydrogen fuel cell will activate. If you look at the core, you'll notice the energy is going up a lot faster now. That's because the hydrogen fuel cell produces kind of a lot of power for something of this size. Now that we've seen that our life support is working, let's just go ahead and turn it all off. Because we don't need it running. Now, let's save again now that we've wired all of that up. So we're going to call this one Tutorial 3, and we're going to right-click, Save. Let's see, was there anything else I needed to do for this section? Nope, we're all good. So this is how you do the very basic life support setup. Hopefully you figured this all out and will not have any trouble with life support. I hope I didn't miss anything important. In the next section, we are going to cover basic weaponry and gyropods. Okay, so what we're going to be covering in this section is controlling your ship, using weapons, and making your ship fly. Those are all relatively simple things to do, so let's jump right into it. we're going to start by getting us some weapons. To do this, go to the Space Combat 2 tab. Under Ship Tools, find Ship Weapons. The weapons that we want in particular are fighter dumbfire rockets. To get to those, select the fighter class, then go to Missiles, and then select the dumbfire rockets. Now, we want these to fire forward, so make sure that the direction is set to forward. Now, these three sliders here at the bottom control various stats about the weapons. So for example, if you want a weapon that does more damage, you can turn up the damage slider. Or if you want less damage, you can turn it down. And the other ones, they're pretty self-explanatory. However, it is worth noting that different weapons do have different effects depending on how you set these sliders. And by that I do mean, like, on beams, for example, the range slider will actually increase the range. However, on projectile weaponry, such as an autocannon, the range slider will increase the speed of the projectile. For our purposes, we don't need to change these sliders, so we're just going to spawn 2 dumbfire rockets. We're going to take them, and we are going to position them. We're going to right-click on both of these while holding C, which by default is the context menu, and disable the collisions. Now we're just going to take the weapons and align them as we see fit. Again, making use of that Shift E. It is a super useful key combination to know. Now we've just gotta line these up. Don't need to be super precise about it. Yeah, that looks close enough. Alright, now we're just going to go ahead, weld both of these. And that's all we're going to do with the weapons for the moment, is spawn them and get them on the ship. Now, moving on, we are going to put the gyropod in. So, to get the gyropod, you go to the Tools tab of your tool menu, you go down to SBAP, and you get the gyropod. Just left-click to spawn it. Now, something to note about the gyropod. A lot of people seem to think that this direction right here is forward. That is incorrect. This direction is forward, meaning that these ear-like things on the top are pointing towards the back. Another common misconception is people like to put the gyropod on top of their ship for some reason, and no one understands why. You don't want it on top of your ship unless that's where you want your pivot point. The technically correct location to put the gyropod would be in the center of mass of your ship. However, usually you want to just put it in the center because calculating the center of mass might prove a little difficult. Now, in order to accurately put this in the center, we're just going to go ahead and use precision alignment once again. Now, this time, instead of point hitbox, we need point bounding box center. If we select that, when we click on an entity, it will put the point exactly in the center of that entity. Now we're going to shift-click the door. As you can see, that's put it right in the center. Now if we right-click the gyropod and press Move Entity after making sure our points are set up correctly, in this case we're moving from point 1 to point 2, press Move Entity. As you can see, it has put the gyropod smack dab in the center of your ship. Now, we're just going to go ahead and weld the gyropod. And that's all we're going to do with that for the moment. Up next, we need a chair. To get a chair, you're going to go over to the left, and up at the top there's some tabs. You're going to go find the Vehicle tab. We're going to go ahead and go to the Space Build Enhancement Pack vehicles. In this case, we are going to use the Prometheus chair, a very common choice of chair. We're going to take this, and we are going to put it right inside of our ship. Positioning doesn't matter too much, however you do want to make sure that you have a good view when you're sitting in it, and that when you get out behind the chair and not on top of your ship, as that can cause problems later on. Now, once again, swap the chair to your ship. Now, we only need one more entity. To get this entity, we're going to go to the Wire menu in the Tools menu, and we're going to scroll down until we find Vehicle Control and the Pod Controller within that. We're just going to put the Pod Controller right next to our buttons. Now, right-click the Pod Controller with the tool out, and then right-click the chair to link the two together. Now we have all of our entities. Let's start off by wiring up our weapons. We're going to get our wire tool out again. That is under Tools, Wire, just in case you forgot. And we're going to go over to our weapons. As you can see, they have a single input. That input simply tells them to fire. Now, if you hold Shift, you can again select multiple inputs. We're going to select both fire inputs, and we're going to go to our pod controller, and we're going to wire them to mouse 1. Now, if we sit in our chair, you'll notice that the pod controller has turned green. That means it has detected us inside of the chair. And if we press mouse 1, we'll fire the rockets. Now, the next thing that we're going to need to wire up is the gyropod. There's a few ways you can do this, and as you can see, the gyropod has kind of a ridiculous number of inputs. At first, it can be kind of daunting to look at this list, especially if you have a smaller screen resolution, as it can take up, well, more than your entire screen. In this case, though, we don't need most of these inputs. The only ones that we actually need to touch are forward, back, move left, move right, move up, move down, pitch molt, yaw molt, roll molt, level, and freeze. That's a much smaller list. Just so you can see, I've highlighted all of them. Now, we're going to press R to cancel that, and we're going to wire up these one at a time, starting with the forward input. I'm going to wire that to W. I'm going to wire back to S. I'm going to wire move left to A. I'm going to wire move right to D. I'm going to move up to spacebar. Move down will be Alt. And we're going to go down. We're going to skip over the multipliers. We'll get to that in a moment. Level is going to be on R. And then the freeze input we will come back to later, as there's something special that I want to do with it. Now, if you remember correctly, earlier we made two values on our constant value. One of them was 1.5 as a multiplier for our generators, and the other one was 0.2. That 0.2 is about to come in and be useful. We're going to wire pitch molt, yaw molt, and roll molt all to that 0.2. This is because, by default, the gyropod is obscenely sensitive due to how parenting works. Now, that's the basics of wiring up your ship. Or you will notice that we still haven't wired freeze and we still haven't wired activate. Those two inputs are required to actually make this fly. However, we want to do something special with them so that when you get in the chair, it will turn on the gyropod and unfreeze the ship. However, when other people get in the chair, we do not want it to unfreeze the ship. In order to do that, we're going to need a couple of wire gates, which you can find in the Wire tab under Chips, Gates. So there's a whole number of gates in here. The one that we need, or well, rather there is a few that we need. We are going to need, under Entity, going to want equals, or that is, there it is, equal. There is a search bar, however I'm not using it. Don't know why. Next, we need, under logic, a not invert. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to start wiring this up. So the not invert is going to go to the active output of the pod controller. And then the A is going to go to... okay, so one little thing that I just forgot, and I realize this now. We need to go back into gates. We need to get one more. We need the driver chip. This will allow us to get the driver of our chair. So we're going to wire the driver up to the pod controller's entity output. It's important to note that you do not want to click on Create Entity. You just want the entity output. Now we're going to have Entity A go to that. Then we need something for Entity B. How are we going to get that? Well, we're going to go ahead, go back into Entity, and we're going to go ahead and get an owner chip. We are now going to go ahead and wire the input of the owner chip just to the output of the pod controller. Now that should be outputting the owner. And then we're going to wire the B input to the output of that. So, as you can see here, if the driver is equal to the owner, this will output 1. Now, we need one more chip. If we go to logic, there is an AND all. Now, we need to wire A to the equals and B to our not invert. Now, what we want is for gyropod to be frozen when this is true. So, we're going to go to our gyropod and we're going to select the freeze input and wire it to our AND all. That sound you just heard was the gyropod freezing. Now we're going to go ahead and take the activate input of the gyropod and wire it to the active output of our pod controller. This seems like kind of a complicated setup, however, the reason that I've done this as opposed to the more simplistic setup that I usually would teach you is because we've had a couple of incidents in the last couple of days where someone sat in someone else's ship and it unfroze and then started flopping around and it got removed, and apparently they hadn't saved yet. Which brings us back to the usual save really often, otherwise you might lose all of your work, as happened in that guy's case. Now, this is actually just about all wired up. I'm just going to check my notes here to make sure I'm not forgetting anything important. Okay, doesn't look like I am. So, before we go any further, duplicate your ship. This is a very important step. I'm going to call this tutorial 4. And we're just going to right click and save. Now that our stuff is saved, we have one thing to do, and that is called parenting. Now, two very, very important notes about parenting. It should be the last thing you do, as in, you should have saved, and every other piece of your ship should be completed before you parent. And secondly, you really do not want to duplicate after you've parented, as this can cause some very strange, undefined behavior, and also occasionally crash the server and make everyone yell at you. Now, the reason I'm mentioning parenting is because on this server it is a rule that you must parent your spaceship before you fly it. You cannot unfreeze your spaceship until you have parented. Parenting is extremely simple, however. All that you need to do after you have saved your ship is get out the Auto Parenter tool under Constraints. You can leave the default values for vehicle and hull weight, usually. You do not need to change them. It has nothing to do with the weight of your ship in total. We've had a few people misunderstanding that recently, which is why I mention it. I will explain really quickly what those two values are, however. The hull weight is what it sets each individual piece of your ship to. So every part of your ship with this setting will have a weight of 200. The vehicle weight setting will set the weight of your chair. Why setting the weight of your chair different is important is because if you don't, your chair might go flying out of your ship because chairs cannot be parented due to a bug in Gary's mod. Now, all you need to do to parent this is click on the parent prop. How you decide the parent prop can be a little tricky. You want to use usually the biggest prop in your ship, and you also want to make sure that it is facing in the correct direction. Now, when you spawn a prop, it will always have its forward direction facing you. So that is how you can tell if it is in the correct direction. Now, if your ship starts wobbling uncontrollably after you parent it and unfreeze it, then that means that either your weight settings were too high or too low, or your parent prop was too small. All we need to do now, though, is left-click with the parenting tool on our door, which we're using as the parent prop, and it's done. If we unfreeze it, you'll see that there's no weird lag going on. It works totally fine. And if we go in here, this should allow us to fly it. As you can hear, it turned on, and it moves. Now you'll notice one other thing though, and that is that the mouse aim isn't working. The gyropod does have mouse aim, and the reason it's not working is because we actually kind of forgot a step. This is why saving before you parent is very important, because you cannot change this after you parent it. So let's remove this ship. And that's interesting, that gate did not actually save. That's a non-issue, however. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to load up tutorial 4, and I want to paste this at the original location. Okay, so if we go ahead, we jump in here, let's go ahead and fix the fact that that gate didn't weld. And next up, we need to get our gyropod tool out again, which is again under Tools, SPEP, Gyropod. we need to right-click the gyropod and right-click the chair. You'll see in the chat box that the vehicle has been linked to the gyropod. Now, we're just going to go ahead and we're going to save it again, this time as tutorial 5. And we're going to go ahead, use our parenting tool, parent it, unfreeze it. We can confirm that the chip is there. The door still works, because I felt a need to test that for some reason. And if we get in, mouse aim works. If we hold R, the ship will level out. If we press space, it will go up. If we press Alt, it will go down. A will go left, D will go right, S will go back, and W will go forwards. Now, before we go into space, we probably will want to fill up our life support a little bit. Because unless we do that, we're just going to die horribly. In order to do that, we're just going to press our 1, 2, 3 buttons, with about a second of delay in between pressing each one, to give it a second for the last generator to get going. We're going to let our power and air and everything fill up just a little bit, and then we will be right back. Okay, so I let this fill up for just a couple of minutes. We don't have too much in storage, but it'll last us for probably about 5 minutes, give or take. So we're just going to go ahead and have a quick fly in space with our new spaceship. As you can see, everything is working. That sound you just heard was the sound of the water vaporator turning off as we've entered space, and it doesn't work in space because there isn't an atmosphere. As you can see, there's someone with a space station mining some asteroids, and if we shoot, we fire our rockets, and why not, let's shoot at them, teach them the dangers of being in space. Because when you're in space, you're a free game and anyone can kill you all they want. Now, our missiles ran out of ammo. They'll reload shortly. So as you can see, you now have a functioning ship for you to go around and explore the map. So for example, we can land our ship on this planet, have a look around. That's it for this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. Go ahead, give me a like, do whatever, follow whatever channels. This will probably be posted on the Diaspora community channel, and in the description you'll find links to things like my Twitter and my own YouTube channel. See you next time.